great. All right.
This is the one.
This is the one. All right, Laura, before we dig into all the great stuff about your backstory and what you're up to today, tell us a story about being on Friends.
Well, that was an extremely fun experience. It was my first ever live studio audience, 3-camera television experience. And to this day remains my only experience of that because they don't really do it like that anymore. They film most things the way they film movies now. So, and at the time the show was wildly popular, enormously popular. 32 million people watched that episode I was on at the time that it ran the first time. So it boggles my mind to think how many people must have seen it by now,
Right.
So, so I'm new and I'm figuring everything out. And I have not had this experience before, but I had seen a few live tapings where I'd gone to see friends of mine be in shows and stuff. So I was familiar with the idea that they have a warm-up comic. And so I'm being called out to the set and I hear the warm-up comic talking to the audience in the background, and I can hear this Cayouette. And I'm thinking, what is happening? I'm on the set with 6 of the most famous faces in television at the time, and they're chanting my name. And I found out later from my manager who was sitting in the crowd that what had happened was the comic, when he saw that I was being introduced, he asked if anybody in the audience knew my name, how to pronounce it. And my manager yelled from her seat somewhere in the middle, Cayouette. And the comic said, excuse me, I can't hear you. And she says, Cayouette. And he says, I can't hear you. And so a few people around her jump in and they yell together, Cayouette. And then he goes, say what? And it became this chanting thing of by the time I come out, they're all yelling, Cayouette, Cayouette. And I'm sure that David Schwimmer and all of them were like, what is up with this girl? So yes, that was my introduction to Friends.
What a big stage opportunity. Like here's the biggest stage of television. It's a live, broadcast or live, recording of it.
Live taping.
So you have
what's crazy is that it was a huge time in the arc of the show as well, because it was when Ross and Rachel had just broken up, and I'm Ross's first date and Ben Stiller was Rachel's first date. But it's also when the actors had just done that thing where they all 6 banded together to have a salary increase that would be equitable for all. They created their own little mini union, and that was international entertainment news.
Yeah. So the fascinating thing that learning your backstory is that you had what you thought no intention of becoming an actor. You went to school for creative writing, for English, like you were a professor so all this 25 years into your life, like the theater, the idea of being an actor, Hollywood, that's not even a thought.
Never even occurred to me.
Talk about that. Talk about like growing up, like just thinking your dream was one thing and then hearing a voice. Talk about that leading up to that in that moment.
Well, I like a lot of kids, you probably wanted to be a fireman or a cowboy. I wanted to be a race car driver and an astronaut, and those seemed like doable goals. And then I was told by the planet, no, that's not going to happen for you. So the dreams I had as a small child were, the kind that you have when you're playing with dolls and you don't understand what real work is. And so then when I finally, understood what jobs are and how they work and all that. I wanted to be an author. That was always I always knew I was a storyteller, and that was the way I understood stories were told, was through writing and through books. But I can honestly say I didn't understand that the people on television made money. Like, it didn't occur to me that the Andy Griffith show, that all those people were getting checks. You know what I mean? Like, I'm watching Charlie's Angels. I don't know those people are getting paid. So I enjoyed television and film just as much as everybody as I was growing up. I loved all the movies and TV I saw. I just didn't understand that was an occupation. So it took me a
So
while.
it wasn't something that you were going to go towards. It was just like, oh, I love that. But
no, I was going to be an author.
Sensible things.
I wanted to be a good author. I wanted to actually be one of the best authors, and I wanted to teach college. And I thought that would be teaching literature. And I have indeed written books. I've written 8 of them now, and I have taught college. But I stopped teaching college English, and I began teaching filmmaking and working with actors and teaching actors how to do their jobs. And so, yeah, it's a different thing than I thought. But I'm doing my dream. I'm just doing it different shape.
A little bit differently. So the through line is the storytelling. Like you were going to be a storyteller. You just didn't realize the medium might be not that you didn't write. You obviously did. But like that there was another way to do that you hadn't even really considered.
And not just the acting, but the producing, the directing, all the ways all of the ways that I'm now able to tell stories. I'm currently making a documentary, and that's another way to tell a story. So I just didn't understand as a child how many ways there were to be a storyteller.
So what happens when you're just quiet? Is it on a train? That the voice comes to you. No, because you can listeners can interpret this however they want, but following something inside of you that tells you, it sounds like loudly. Talk about that. Like what did it say? The voice in your head. What did you do from that? Like talk about that experience.
Well, I consider it that acting must be my calling, because that's what I feel. I feel I was called to this. I was indeed on a train. I was doing a modeling gig. I paid for a lot of my education with a number of jobs, and modeling was one of those jobs. Again, a thing I didn't realize you could make money for until somebody offered me money for it. But yeah, I'm tall, which has been hard for me as an actor, but was great for me as a model. And so I was coming back from New York to DC area, and I was just watching the world go by, and I heard a voice, and the voice said, "You're supposed to be an actor." Now, to be clear, I had not heard voices before that. I have not heard voices since. It is not my habit to hear voices. It would be very hard for me to tell you whether that was a male or female, external, internal. It just caught my attention that something said, "You're supposed to be an actor." And since I hadn't heard voices before, I paid attention and thought, well, what does that mean for me? And considered it that, yes, I had been called. I had been called to this other way of storytelling. And I do mention that, and I hope that I'm right about this, because if she finds out I've been telling everybody this and I'm wrong, but Renee Russo, I read, had the same exact experience when she was modeling, and that the voice said the exact same words. "You're supposed to be an actor." So I don't know if there's just some voice floating around in models. I have no idea what it's all about.
Right. Well, maybe, romantically it could be a muse. Like it is the muse of the cinema, the muse of the theater that was kind of floating around, saw you on the train, and be like, I gotta let this lady know.
Well, and it could just be my own stomach guiding me in a way that, because by 25, I recognized that the people on TV are making money. Yeah. So, I was, in fact, was making money as a model, and that meant sometimes I had already done a commercial before I left Maryland. So, so it might have been my own. I have no idea. I just followed it. And I continue to follow it. And I have no idea why I'm supposed to be an actor. I just do it.
But, the idea of, whether wherever the voice came from, like the idea of like, we have a premonition, we have a dream, we have a thought, we have a realization that's to our core, and that we follow it. Like, I think that starts your journey in, the mindset around like, hey, you know what? I'm following this idea, this thought, 25, it's not early to start acting at 25.
No, most women's careers are ending by 30 at that time. So I didn't even do my first film till I was 31. Wow. I was in my 30s when I did Friends.
So, that for another reason, there's hope for anybody who's thinking of, you know what, it's too late for me. I can't do this. Or, it's frivolous to go down this road. Like, if you really feel passionately about something, Laura's story is a perfect way for you to just remind yourself it's never too late.
Well, in my book about acting, No Small Parts, I list a number of actors who started late in life. There are many. I certainly didn't invent it. There are many who started late in life.
Yeah.
And obviously more men than women, but that could be changing. That could be evolving.
Yeah. Or even like didn't get discovered or didn't find that break until, I think Morgan Freeman was people, like, yeah. You all of a sudden you're an overnight success and everyone's like, wow. Yeah. But they've been working for years to earn the right to be that overnight success. I believe it was Michelle
Pfeiffer who said it takes 10 years to become an overnight success.
I love that. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned something, and it's in your book that like, it's around belief. And you talk about like, if your 104th audition for a commercial is the one you book, how would that change your perspective about the no you got at 97, 98, 99? Talk about that philosophy, because I really feels like that there's a mindset and a perspective that you probably have now that, you might tell a young actor.
Well, that's in my writing book. In my acting book, No Small Parts, but it could just as easily be in my writing book or any other thing about how to achieve your goals, how to strive for that which you want out of life. Because a lot of our anxiety around accomplishment or lack thereof comes from not knowing things. It's the vagueness. It's the dearth of future information that gets us all anxious. And so the point of what I call the lesson of the 100 auditions is that if I had known in advance that I was going to book my 104th audition, think how differently I would have seen my 97th audition. Because, by the time I got to my 97th audition, I thought, gee, come on. Who are we kidding here? This is never going to happen. I'm not meant to do this. I don't know what that voice was talking about. I'm not supposed to be an actor. It was wrong. I don't belong here. Nobody wants me. It's not going to work. And by the 99th audition, you're pretty convinced that like, hello voice, I demand a recount. I'm pretty sure you got it wrong. You were, supposed to hit the row behind me on the train. And so, yeah, there's this sense of that the more you go without that acknowledgement that you're on the right track, the harder it is to keep believing that you'll ever succeed at any of it. Whereas if I had known in advance that I was going to book my 104th audition, then when I get to 97, I'd be like, I'm almost there, 97 in the book.
7 more to go.
Right. And I would see each one of those rejections differently than I had as I was living them out. And it's only that not being able to see the future that causes all that internal anxiety and doubt. So that has helped me to reframe when I go through a dark period, like COVID. COVID was the longest I've ever gone without work. And so that's true of a lot of people, not just in the entertainment industry, but for sure people in the entertainment industry. It was a rude awakening for many of us who were pretty used to working quite a bit. And, it's not about whether or not you have enough savings in the bank and all that. At some point, it's about whether you believe you should even be doing this at all. Like, am I crazy? So remembering that, hey, if I knew in advance when COVID was going to end, or if I knew in advance when the industry would pick back up, or I wouldn't have anxiety.
Yeah. And then, it reminds me of the kind of hindsight's 2020. You're like, looking back, you're like, oh, all those were so important. You can, and it's so much of it is how do we tell the story of our life?
Right.
How do we connect the dots? I think Oprah talks about connecting the dots of your life, and if belief is a very elusive thing, confidence is a little easier to talk about. Belief in yourself, true belief in yourself, because what you're talking about there is like, if you knew, well, of course, nobody could ever truly know, but if you had a belief that like, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is going to work at some point. I just need to put a few more reps in, to use like a gym reference. Like, just keep doing the reps, keep showing up, keep doing the audition. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as
discipline.
Guaranteed. I mean, if you go to the gym, you will get results. Whereas if you're in my industry, there is a chance that you'll only work once, or that you'll only work a few times. You know, that will happen. I do believe there is at least one job for every single person in this industry.
But in no small part, you talk about like being so valuable. I think it's like you say, you're so valuable. You're so good at the last job that they just lose sleep thinking about where to put you next. Like, and I think that's such a misunderstood like piece of, because acting is probably different than almost all the other, kind of art forms, in the sense that like there is a limited amount of space, and it's really somebody, a casting director, a director, deciding if you're it, and it's nothing that you necessarily can do about it. They're just making a decision based on, do you look like the person that they have in their head, and other variables. So talk about that, trying to really be valuable, and so that people want to bring you back and use you again. You've worked with Tarantino 4 times, so perfect example of somebody who's like, I'm going to write a role for her,
That's true.
And bring you on. Yeah,
that's true, because he did write Django, that part, with me in mind. So the person we're quoting actually, though, is Richard Dreyfuss. Richard Dreyfuss is the one
there
who
you go.
said, yeah, he's the one who said, make it so they can't sleep at night thinking of ways to put you in their movie. And when he told me that advice, I will admit that in my sassy youth, I thought, you don't know anything. The industry has changed. They don't work like that anymore. And it's true, the industry is always changing, and things always don't work the way they used to. However, there are some things that are just true. And it is true that if you're unforgettable, you're unforgettable. People think of you, and they can't stop thinking of you. And what happened was, Richard had given me that advice before my audition for what ended up becoming my first part in a feature film. I was going in for the sequel of Terms of Endearment, which was one of the most beloved movies of the 70s and won a zillion awards. And they were doing this sequel 20-something years later, but with the same, Shirley MacLaine, Jack Nicholson, it was all the same players. And so I went in for one of the smaller roles. Obviously, I wasn't there to play a major lead. And I went in for one of the smaller roles, and the casting director was just blown away. And she was somebody they had brought out of retirement. And so Richard gave me this advice for my callback. He said, make it so they can't sleep at night thinking of ways to put you in the movie. And I didn't know what, in the beginning I thought, well, what, am I supposed to zen, like how do you make people not sleep at night? But I just did what I could do, which is prepare and really truly have my own unique take on the role, bring my own voice to the moment, and try and make something special out of what was essentially a nothing little part. So I go in, I do the callback, and the writer-director is there. And he was the same gentleman who wrote Steel Magnolias, which is a film that my family absolutely loves. We're Southerners, so that's a big favorite.
I remember my mom like seeing that movie and just like talking about it constantly. I was too young to, but it's a great movie. Yeah,
it's such a great movie. And so I really wanted to impress him, and he at some point realized how prepared I was, and he started, for lack of a better term, he started playing with me like tennis, like he'd say, okay, now do it all like you're being chased by a puppy. Now do it all like standing on your head and spinning 3 times. Like it didn't matter really. He noticed that I was so prepared that he kind of got a kick out of, okay, now do the whole thing angry. Now do the whole thing with a Southern accent. Now do the whole thing, And so I was in there for a long time. Yeah. And I left there 100% convinced I got the part. Just certain. I didn't even have to think about it. That part is mine. And I got a phone call from my agent a couple of weeks later saying, you didn't get the part. And I said, no, I did. And she said, no, you didn't. And I'm just starting out. I didn't have any credits at all. She's like, no, you didn't. And I'm like, no, I did. I got that part. I know for a fact I got that part. And she's like, no, you did not. But actually, I'm saying called. This is back when we had pagers. She paged me again about 5-10 minutes later, and I walked over to what these things called payphones and called her back. And she said, okay, well, you didn't get the movie, but you did get this week in Paris shooting a commercial and billboards and all that. So go make a bunch of money. And so I went and had a great time in Paris. And when I came back, I got a phone call and my agent said, you remember that movie you didn't get? And I'm like, yeah. And she said, well, the director can't sleep at night.
Wow.
So he's written a part for you.
Oh,
and
my God.
I couldn't believe it was the exact words. It short-circuited me for a second, but it was true. He couldn't sleep at night. So he wrote a part for me. And that was my first movie. And then I watched Shirley MacLaine, which I also recount in the book, and watched her school all of us in how to steal a scene without even using one word. So, that was the most important. I couldn't have been launched in a better way, even though my part got cut down to one little word by the end.
Yeah, but so going back to your audition, because I want to, the ability to be so prepared that you can be kind of, you talked about, he played with you. He threw ideas out there.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. Not, the idea of like being able to improvise or play or like to be out of your head and just like kind of let's see what happens. Talk about the mindset around that, because I think that's so important, not just I think for actors and artists, but the ability to be like that, to be free in life and to be able to kind of play. What does that come from, and what do you understand about that?
Well, I actually think that goes back to being an athlete in many ways, being a student, being somebody who's had to be prepared for lots of other things before this career. I also use that same methodology in my writing now. I think one of the biggest, I don't want to call it a mistake, but one of the biggest time users that I had in my writing was that I didn't really have a process for preparation. I didn't really know how to get ready. And now that's why I wrote Writing Unblocked, which is how I went from writing one book in 20 years to 5 books in 4 years, because now I have this preparation, and preparation is so important. I think when I was a athlete and a student, I understood that you can't just show up and think it's going to go well. You have to do all the prep work before the test in your class or before the game or the meet or whatever, or you're going to fall flat. You're never going to succeed without preparation. And yet we think that as an actor, you could just show up and what? Do what?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to prepare.
There's almost this kind of underlying thought that I think non-actors have, or that like they're so talented, they just show up and it just comes out perfect. Right? I mean, like there's
some are, but even they have to. Leo is absolutely, Leonardo DiCaprio is absolutely naturally gifted. That is obvious. You look at tapes of him when he's 3 years old, entertaining the people at the Rose Bowl with his break dancing. You look at tapes of him when he was on, what was it, Growing Pains, or he
or What's Eating Gilbert Grape. You saw it right
then
there.
it's very obvious. He should have gotten an Academy Award for that. He was a teenager. But you can see that he's naturally gifted. The guy is naturally gifted. Yeah. That said, do you have any idea how much prep work that guy did for Django, for The Revenant? He kills himself to get something right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest thing I learned about moving from, sports and studies into these more creative arts is that I think we get confused and think that it's about inspiration, and it's still about perspiration. You still need the preparation. You can't just think the muse is going to come and write your book for you, or the improv queens are going to come and visit you while you're on set, or, you know, it doesn't work like that. It does work like that if you've done the prep work.
Right.
If you've done the prep work, then yes, you can fly and be free when it's time to work.
Right. It's like, do the work so that you can let it all go and and just let things happen.
You know, I dance in the Mardi Gras parades with a group called the Pussyfooters. We're over 100 women who are over 30, and we're a nonprofit group, and we dance. Well, we do lots of events. We do events, over 50 events per year. But the Mardi Gras parades, you know, that is so much fun to be a part of. It's so amazing to be entertaining the, you know, millions of people that come to celebrate Carnival with our city. And I figured out year one of being a pussyfooter that I didn't want to miss that by being worried about the steps, getting the dances right. So I practiced my dances and practiced my dances and practiced my dances till I could do them in my sleep, so that on the day I could just enjoy the crowds and make eye contact and smile and have fun, because I was so prepared that I didn't have to think about dancing when it came time to dance.
Yeah.
So it's like that.
And that, you know, I think when you say it, it seems so clear, obvious, like do the work, and then, you know, but I would imagine in acting and in sports and everything, like there's still people that like haven't quite learned that lesson, and
but especially with acting. I mean, they think like people are not arrogant enough to think they could just become Steph Curry, but they are arrogant enough to think they could become Leonardo DiCaprio without doing any of the work. It's crazy. They don't realize inside of every perfectly satin finished ballet slipper is a mangled, bloody foot. It takes so much work to look like you're effortless as a ballerina. And that's everything in life that requires this kind of mastery, that requires this kind of training. If you don't do the training, nobody wants to see what you have to offer. Right. And if you do the training, you're going to make it look easy, and people won't know how hard you trained.
And there's a few people that like kind of are just themselves, like in every role they play.
Sure.
And they're good looking enough to pull it off or whatever. They've got some sort of
stars. Yeah.
Yeah. But for the most part, you know, if you want to be a career actor, and you've done an incredible job, 25, 30 years, 92. So yeah, I mean, don't want to age you here, but yeah, I mean, it's the breadth of work, you know, and then the writing and the ways that you're finding ways to help young actors with your acting book, and you're now with your writers writing Unblocked, you know, helping writers kind of unblock themselves from. I
also still do coaching. I you know, my schedule isn't always allowing it, but I try and do coaching as much as possible. Yeah.
What that reminds me, I really wanted you to talk about, was it Ivana Chubbuck?
Ivana Chubbuck.
Okay. Yeah. You know, we have acting coaches, and we have, you know, throughout our lives, and usually have multiple, but there's usually one that kind of is the one that probably says it all kind of just the right way, that for our heart or for our, you know, for our creative self to really understand it fully. It seems like she's that for you. Is that true?
As an acting coach, I would say she and a woman named Jackie Bartone, who I worked with at the American Academy. Acting wise, I would say that they had the highest impact on me as coaches. And then mentorship wise, I would say that it's Quentin, Tarantino, Richard Dreyfuss, and Kevin Costner.
Okay.
So yeah, I have benefited from the experience of others, and that's one reason that I am so determined to keep paying that forward. I don't have children, so I want to, you know, why should I have all this information of all these amazing mentors that I've had and amazing teachers that I've had?
Well, and a master's degree in creative writing too, that, you know, like why you to not take that masterful skill and utilize it to help people would seem like a miss for so many people.
Well, and especially because my original intention was to teach. So,
right,
you know,
right. We want my
life to be instructional.
Yeah. But talk about whether it's Ivana, is it Ivana?
Ivana Chubbuck.
Yeah, Ivana, or somebody that really kind of like helped you shift and really become that professional actress and that allowed you to really kind of continue and have the career that you've had.
Well, with Ivana, the biggest thing that happened there, I mean, I told you what Richard said, and that was obviously high impact for me. With Ivana, she really, I had a teacher in high school named Miss Marshall, who was our art teacher, and we used to call that class martial arts. and she gave me a B or a C one time on something that I was like, hello, everybody else drew stick figures, and this is an incredibly well done drawing. Why are you giving me a B? And she said, because those people drew the best stick figure they could, and you could have done this better. And that's how Ivana was, that she didn't grade us against each other. She graded you against your best self. And so I remember in particular, I went through a phase where she kept assigning me victims to play, like people who had been involved in bad relationships, who had been hurt or whatever kind of thing. And I finally went to her and said, I feel like I've conquered this victim thing. Can we move on? I've done like 7 of them in a row. And she's like, okay. And then assigned me Streetcar Named Desire, the Stella part, which is the wife abuse victim. And I thought, well, what the heck? So I went ahead and started preparing it. But I went to her and I said, well, what? I asked you, please, can I not play any more victims? And you give me this. And she said, yeah, so as soon as you stop playing them as victims, I'll stop assigning them.
Wow.
And that was like a revelation for me, is that, I'm still doing that thing of judging the character. I'm still doing that thing of thinking I know what people are and how they work from an outside point of view, and not allowing myself to just think, how would I become this person? What things would I have to think of differently, or what choices would I have to have made differently so that I would be this person? So quit judging and not justify everything they do. Make it make sense in your world, in the way you operate, because yeah, I do operate differently than she does. I've had men be abusive toward me, and I don't stick around for it. But I thought, but what if I wanted to stick around more than I wanted to be in control of how much I get hit in this house? So then what would I be doing? Then what would be a win for me? So maybe the win isn't, obviously she wants to be with him. So the win isn't getting away. The win is making him prove over and over how much he loves her, which he does often through these horrible things he does. So, it's this idea of her participating in her own choices in life, and so it was a different way of looking at it. And instead of judging it from the outside going, well, I would never. Well, it's not you. So you don't have to. You don't have to ever. But she would. So why? Why would she? How did she? How did it get like this? What choices did she make? So don't judge, justify.
Yeah, that's really interesting that, we oftentimes, I remember being in acting school and getting a role that I didn't like, or that I didn't understand. I didn't understand, or I felt like this guy was weak, or I didn't, I had the hardest time trying to figure out where he was trying to be powerful, where he was trying to have control over his life, and then play from there, versus like my own feelings about who I am, or not wanting to feel any similarity to this person who I had already judged.
Yes.
Very
and you
interesting.
can't play somebody you're judging like that, unless that person's whole character is around judging themselves. But that's not really the case usually. So, usually the person is just trying to do their day. And so you need to figure out, well, this is how they do their day. How would I get to that place where this is how I would do my day?
So you talked about mentorship with Richard Dreyfuss, with Kevin Costner. I'd love to hear about your relationship with Quentin Tarantino. and kind of where that started, and then we'll talk about Django Unchained.
Well, we met at a party.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, as many things happen in the world, it wasn't a networking event or anything like that. It was a friend of mine's house party, and I was there with a friend, and she also was named Laura, and he started teasing when he found out our names were both Laura. He's like, "Oh, L&L, I have all your albums," and he was teasing us for some period of time, and so finally, at some point, he and I ended up in the kitchen together, and my friend Laura wasn't there, and he said, "Oh, so you and Laura are old friends?" And we ended up talking about the culture of friendship and how when you lose an old friend, because Laura was a new friend, and I had just lost an old friend, and he said things about when you lose an old friend, you lose the entire culture of that relationship, all the inside jokes, all that. So we got into what I thought was a fairly deep and revealing conversation, early in the evening. And then that was a friend of mine's house. And at some point they clear out anybody who was not a friend of the owner. And so they sent me and a number of other people up the stairs behind this wall of giant men. And they were clearing out the rest of the house, and they started pushing Quentin out. And I said, "Oh, he's with me." And so they let him stay and come up the stairs with me. And I think in that moment, he had to have wondered, why is she allowed to stay and I'm not? And who is she that she's the reason I get to stay? Mm-hmm. So that was how we met. And I think that was a good foot to get off on.
Was this pre-Reservoir Dogs or after?
No. I asked him earlier in that night. This was a question I used to ask people all the time because I like to ask questions that help reveal more than just the answer. They help reveal the kind of person you're dealing with. So I had asked him earlier in the night, what's the best thing that happened to you today? And he said that he had finally come up with the ending of a script that he had been working on for some time. He had been working on the script for years, and he that day had figured out the ending, and so he was extremely excited about that. And that told me that he was a person who doesn't need other people to be happy, that he finds satisfaction in his work, that he can amuse himself, and that he cared deeply and passionately about what he does and could find joy in that. And so the thing he had just finished that day was the ending of Kill Bill.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that's when I met him.
So that's the beginning of your friendship, and then you're in Kill Bill 2, correct?
Yes. Well,
yeah.
at the beginning, it was all Kill Bill. As
right.
we shot it, it was.
No, that's right. It's all one big movie, and then they made it into 2. Good, fair point. There you go.
Yeah. So they divided it into the Eastern and the Western, but originally it was just Kill Bill.
Right. So talk about that first opportunity to work. Was that your first time working with Quentin, or was there something before that?
It was.
Okay.
And then after that, we did, there was a movie he produced called Daltrey Calhoun that I had a part in. There was a movie that he and I produced together called Hell Ride that starred Dennis Hopper, David Carradine, Eric Balfour, cast of thousands, and Michael Madsen. And then he actually also, when I directed my short film, he lent me his camera to shoot it on. So I guess we've technically worked together 5 times, and then the 5th, of course, being Django Unchained. Yeah.
So, for the sake of time, let's get to Django.
Okay.
A lot of people's one of their favorite movies of all time. I've watched it recently, and it's better the 5th time I've seen it. It's so good. I'm always like, wow, this is so bloody. And then I think I can't wait till I can, have my son watch it. And it's no time soon. He's 8. He's not watching this anytime soon. But I always feel like,
different kids are different. Some 8-year-olds have seen it and loved it, and some 8-year-olds are not ready.
My 8-year-old is not ready. But I always, when I love something, I want to share it with my son, and I always think like, wonder when that is. But anyway, so Django, talk about how that role came to you. When Quentin kind of shared with you the script, and then we'll go into the movie itself and filming it.
So with that original meeting happening about Kill Bill, he ended up giving me the script to read and give him notes. And I think he thought I was going to do what most people do, which is I would read it and then say, the note is, you're a genius. And, I didn't get a master's degree in creative writing and English literature or nothing. So I actually spent 2 days, 5 hours a day over the course of 2 days, giving him my notes on Kill Bill. And after that, he started having me read his scripts and give notes. There's a group of us. I'm not alone. There's a group of us that he gives his scripts to that read them and then give him notes. So when I first received Django Unchained, by then I'm living in New Orleans. I've left Hollywood behind and I've, started a new life, but same career, just new place. And so I get the script and it's, again, 200 and something page script. And I'm on page like 92, reading this work of obvious genius, clear another place on the shelf for the next Academy Award for Screenplay, And on page, I think it was 92, it says, Laura Lee, my name is Laura Lynn Cayouette. It says, Laura Lee, Candy Fitzwillie, a tall, strawberry blonde, attractive, 40-ish Southern belle. And I was like, wait, what? And I must have reread that description a dozen times, thinking, is this, there's only one of me. And it's my name, it's me, right? Is this me? And really just wondering, is this for me? But I didn't let myself dare to dream. And I just kept reading and taking notes for, perusal later. And,
I love that he gave you the script without telling you, hey, this might be a part in there. You just it was like a little mine he just left there. Like, let's see what happens with this.
Well, and, again, lots of that movie is cut as well, just like with Kill Bill, with, all these movies that get cut to ribbons. I'm so glad that he's eventually leaving the 2-hour tyranny so he can tell his stories his way. But, I realized it was a relatively big part. It kept having more and more scenes, and I thought, well, this seems like an awfully big part for little old me. But, I took my notes and did all that stuff, and for 5 months, I talked to Quentin about that script without ever mentioning the role. And then when they were coming to New Orleans for location scouting, I met with all the producers for dinner. And as I sit at the table, I got there early, and as they come in, I realize, oh, wait, I worked with that producer on Enemy of the State. Oh, wait, that producer's a friend of mine. Oh, wait, that producer was on Kill Bill. Oh, wait. And as I sat down, there was only one person at the table that I didn't already know. And I thought, it would be weird for them not to pick me for this role at this point. At this point, this is getting to be like the deck is stacked very much in my...
all these, you didn't ask your agent, like, hey, has this been spoken of? Honestly, this seems like something that would keep me up at night.
A part that big would not have been cast out of New Orleans. That would have been cast out of LA. I think by now everybody knows that pays attention to any of this stuff, trivia-wise, that the studio wanted Lady Gaga. And wow. There was a lot of pressure. Barbara Streisand apparently wanted the role. Uma, there were a lot of people that wanted that role.
Yeah, sure.
And so, you have to know this.
Isn't Uma like 5 inches taller than Leonardo? Sorry, I just wanted to...
Actually, no. Uma is only about an inch taller than I am, and Leo is taller than both of us.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, he is not shrimpy.
Look at what I don't know.
Well, look, the average actor, you're right, is 5'8" or 5'9", because the average man is 5'8" or 5'9". So that's how tall the men in the acting industry are. They're shorter than I am, but they're not short. They're just average.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'10", so I'm taller than
5'10".
all of them.
Yeah.
And Uma's about 6 foot.
Okay. Yeah, she's 6 foot. Yeah, I'm 6'4", so I'm always noticing who the tall actors are. And
Well, Leo's about 6'2".
okay, yeah,
The only
I wouldn't
reason
have guessed
he
that.
looks, not so tall is because Sam Jackson is also tall. Quentin is tall.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of tall people in that movie.
Yeah. All right, I led you astray here. Bring it back. Let's keep going with. So you're sitting in all these producers, people you've worked with.
Well, I
still haven't been offered the role.
That it was, I mean, honestly, I guess my ego was afraid of damage or something. I really just couldn't allow myself to believe it until I was told this is your role, which wasn't until after I auditioned, like a regular person. Yeah. Okay, it wasn't a regular audition. It was just me and Quentin, and we read some of the scenes together, with no other reader in the room. It was just the two of us playing out these parts, but mostly we talked about the character. Yeah. I spent a lot of energy telling him about the prep work I had done and about how I saw her. And I think one of the things that helped is he had met my mother and spent 3 days with my mother previous to this. And she's very much a Southern belle. And I think he saw in me that Southern belle before he wrote that. So I think that helped as well. And the fact that I was here in New Orleans when he came to audition me, I'm here where my Southern roots are. So
is the plantation that you filmed, was that in New Orleans also, or outside of New Orleans?
Outside New Orleans, yeah. I mean, it's supposed to be Mississippi, but yes, we filmed it.
Right.
The plantation that Don Johnson is at, where okay. So they built the exterior of Candyland behind there in one of the fields behind that house, and then they built the interior literally walking distance from my place. So,
wow.
Yeah. It was pretty great.
So you audition for Quentin, you find out you get the role, and then these are huge casts and huge productions, right? Hundreds of people. Talk about your mindset going into, bringing it back to mindset, just your mindset going into, this is kind of like stepping on, the set of Friends. This is the biggest thing ever. Quentin's making a movie. It does not happen that often. He's only going to do 10 in his whole life, or so talk about that.
I think it helps that my first movie was the sequel to Terms of Endearment. So I was surrounded with 5 Academy Award winners and nominees for my first movie. And then, went on to do Friends, and Larry Sanders, I think, was my first or second television show. And that was David Duchovny and Gary Shandling and Red Buttons. And, I've been surrounded by the very best of the best from the beginning. Enemy of the State was Gene Hackman, Will Smith. The cast of Enemy of the State is absurd.
Yeah.
So, my first few movies and television shows were pretty shockingly well cast. And so I'm really spoiled about being surrounded by great people. That said, getting to Django and sitting at that table, I am, on this side, I have Jamie, Academy Award winner, Christoph Waltz, Academy Award winner, little old me, and then Leo, Academy Award winner, and across
Samuel
the table
Jackson.
from me, but across the table from me is Dennis Christopher, who is nominated for Golden Globes, and he's won the BAFTA and whatever. And then Sam Jackson, highest grossing film actor of the history of cinema ever. And Kerry
most
Washington,
F-bombs of all time, I think, too, is probably up there.
Yes. And Kerry Washington, who at the time, while we were filming, she had this brand new TV show start called Scandal, which was a huge mega hit.
Huge hit, yeah.
So, if you want to get intimidated, if you want to have imposter syndrome, if you want to do all that stuff to yourself, that's where you do it. You do it at that table, and you just wreck your whole moment by thinking you don't deserve to sit at that table. But I already had a lot of practice being surrounded by amazing people who were way further along in their careers than not only than I was, but than I ever even was aspiring to be. I don't want to give away enough of myself to get what a lot of those people got. But I think I think for me, the imposter syndrome thing is, I I don't see it the same way. I think a lot of people struggle with that and wrestle with that a different way than I do. For me, it's just the idea of getting used to yourself. Like, okay, if you're in high school and you're given an award for being, top of the class or whatever, you worked for that. You earned that. And when you get that award, you don't feel like I don't deserve this. You feel like I earned this. I worked hard for this. And so when I've been on those sets, I didn't land on them like, accidentally. I worked really, really hard. I know why I was on those sets. I know why Lady Gaga couldn't beat me to play that role. And so that's part of it. And then the other thing is that I remind myself, I'm just trying to get used to myself. The world totally accepts that I am in that movie and that I'm at that table. I just have to get over the moments where I'm sitting around going, oh my God, this little girl from so-and-so who only went to high school at such and such and, is at this table. Yeah, so I'm just getting used to myself of, the same things that had happened my whole career of like, oh, wow, I'm sitting in a award show with Richard Dreyfuss, or I'm sitting at this pool with Quentin Tarantino, or I'm sitting, you have moments where you go, wow, I can't believe this is me. But it's been me the whole time. I did do all the work to get there. So it's just a blip, that moment of like, wow, I can't believe it's me. And instead of seeing it as a moment to get in touch with why I shouldn't be there, I see it as like a moment to not be so jaded and think I deserve all that. Like every once in a while, it's good to go, I can't believe it's me that gets to have this life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the shift of perspective. I think, I interviewed a Olympic swimmer, and he was talking about, before he steps on the platform to dive into the pool, he's thinking, he's not trying to pump himself up. He's not letting his mindset fall negative. He's thinking of all the moments where he worked his tail off, where he did little tiny things, the hours of practice. He's reminding himself that he's supposed to be there. And it's exactly what you just said. Like it's that, and you can still enjoy the fact that you're sitting next to Leo and Tarantino, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can have a moment of, oh my God, I can't believe it's me.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that doesn't mean you're not. They're having those moments too. FYI, I've spent the last 30 years surrounded by fame, power, and money, and I can tell you, almost everybody has a moment where they can't believe they're there. Yeah, no matter who they are. Because we're all fans. You don't think Quentin just sits there going, oh my God, I can't believe I get to go to this, or I can't believe I just met so-and-so. He's a fan first. He freaks out all the time. I watched him freak out when I introduced him to a friend of mine. We're all fans first. That's all. We love it. We think it's pretty amazing because we're amazed by it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think it's always perspective. It's always about and then everyone, unless you're an egomaniac and you don't allow yourself to be a fan of everybody else, like there's great people doing amazing things. To be able to sit and collaborate is the ultimate, for everybody. Let me ask you something too, because we talked about, learning to play a role that you had judged as a role that's a victim. You're now playing a role of like the sister of Leo's character. Like you're a little bit nicer than some of the other characters around you. Like
slave owners.
Yes. Like, so if there was ever a moment, especially I think too, like, just a little bit of white guilt, or you're there and you have all these, black actors there too. And it's like not like trying to really own that space and deliver a great performance, amidst kind of the reality of what that time was. Like, what was that for you, and how did you really achieve that?
Well, first of all, I don't think we're doing anybody any favors by sugarcoating what it is. So if you don't allow it to be as ugly as it is, you're missing the point. We have to show slave ownership for what it was, that even when it resulted in beautiful plantations and pretty ladies in fancy dresses, it's still heinously ugly, disgustingly gross, antithetical to anything, Christian or any, it is just horrific. It is horrific that it still continues today, that today there are still slaves, not just on the planet, but in our country. And so, it is something that if we don't talk about it and we don't show it for what it was, what it is, we're not doing anybody any favors. So I don't believe in winking at the camera and going, I'm not really like this. I would hope that you would understand as an audience member that I'm not like the strippers and serial killers and zombies and whatever that I've played in my life, all of whom I hope to have brought dignity to. I loved playing. I've played many strippers, and I've loved playing every one of them. I've played a few murderers, and I've enjoyed finding a motivation for why would that make sense to that person. But I think that's, again, an area where you don't judge, you justify. And so for us as actors, I'm not going to say that it wasn't difficult. We're here in Louisiana, and the movie company is going to leave, and we're all still going to be here where this happened with the children of the children of the children, the people who did it to each other. So, long after Quentin and his team leave New Orleans, the hundreds of us who were involved in that movie, who are the children's of the slave owners and the slaves, are going to share our city still. And so it was an opportunity for us to sort of look at our own heritage, our own roots, our own histories of our families and their choices and their lifestyles. And that wasn't easy, but it was really gratifying. And I spent a lot of downtime with the people playing the house slaves. And I think we always, around here, a lot of us know that we're all probably related and stuff like that, like it's not as cut and dry as people would like for it to be. It's not as simple as people would like for it to be. But still, we learned a lot about ourselves and each other and our own heritages by sharing these stories of what we were finding out about our own family trees. And so I think it was talking about things is an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we used that opportunity well.
Yeah. No, it's to think of how many, local actors you probably had, that were playing kind of the smaller roles. And then, of course, the Hollywood people that were there. It just seems like a opportunity to cathartic moment, as the story played out, as the horrific kind of moments happened. It's also an opportunity to kind of feel it and experience it and process.
Yeah, because I don't have to, I don't have to decide whether or not I'm proud of that or ashamed of that or what. I'm supposed to be studying it to inform my character and decide whether she is proud of that or she is ashamed of that. It's not about, of course, I am not. Right. I was born now. I was raised now. I don't have the same headset she did. But she was raised in a time where she didn't have very many choices. She was no slave, obviously. She was a free person. She could do what she wanted, but do what you wanted in the context of she's not allowed to own property. She's not allowed to go where she wants to. She's not allowed to do what she wants to. So I explored what parts of her might relate to the people around her and what parts of her might yearn for friendship with the people around her who were her slaves. So, I don't know. There was a lot of opportunity and my family did. I don't think it's a reflection on me. So my family did own slaves, and that was interesting to explore. And one of the things that made me feel better, of course, because we all want to feel better about it, is that I've always known, and this is a story that's been passed down in my family for generations. I've always known that the reason that my family didn't get any of the money was because the woman I descend from ran away with the overseer and was disowned by her family. So the woman I'm descended from is somebody who chose love over money and power. And so I feel like that is in keeping. It's kind of a
beautiful piece of the story there.
But her dad is also my
Right.
That's also my lineage. Her mother's also my lineage, and they were just fine with it. So, I'm
Right.
picking and choosing by saying, oh, I'm her descendant. I'm also their descendant.
I'm more her than
Ugly.
everybody else. Yeah.
It's ugly. It's truly
Yeah.
ugly. There's no way around it. And if we don't all just grow up and say that happened, then we're not ever going to get past it.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things about Tarantino's movies that's so powerful, especially the ones recently that are kind of like historical recreations of, with a better version of how it all plays out. But
I
that
know.
idea that, it's so good. It's just kind of like you get to feel it, you get to experience the horror, and then you get this kind of fantasy like finish that you're just like, yes. And yet it's all right now. Like you can kind of
I know.
away.
Watching Hitler be killed by movies was so
brilliant.
And really, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood one, as soon as it was over and the little, the end, I was like, do my family next, because we've had a death in my family that was heinous, and I was like, yeah, bring my family member back to life, So, that thing, that feeling of like, let's do a redux on what really happened. Let's have the slave win and kill all the slave owners and burn down the plantation,
So we talked about your mindset going into, the filming of it. Like, talk about, one of the other actors there. I mean, I'm sure you've been asked 1,000 times, like, what is it like to work with Leo and all this? But like what did you learn watching some of these, just actors, at the highest level, like doing what they do, and like in their preparation and the way they handle things, it just kind of like sets them apart, or that you took from that experience?
Well, it's interesting. I think people think that I don't know what people think acting is, because honestly, when I the questions that I hear the most have to do with memorizing lines, and I'm like, that has almost nothing to do with acting. Almost nothing. So, that's like thinking that the needle and thread is how a designer becomes, Ralph Lauren or something. It's like nothing to. Yes, it's memorize lines.
That is. Let me clarify that for you. It is people's own insecurity, anxiety about the stupid. So like, I could never do that. Like,
okay, well, maybe you couldn't be an actor, but not because you can't memorize lines.
Right. No, but I think that's that people always project their failures or insecurities or, phobias onto the actor or onto whatever the person is that they admire. So anyway, continue.
When you do lose your lines, it is a horrifying and
it's mortifying.
It's
absolutely
terrible. It's the worst. And all of the actors' hearts go out to whoever it happens to, because it's happened to all of us. And so when it happens to somebody on your set, everybody starts praying. And I mean, it's kind of dear. But, okay, now wait, what was the original question?
So just, on that set, just something you noticed from one of the other actors, and kind of how their mindset, their preparation, things that they were doing to really find their character, find that moment.
Well, at the dining room scene, which I think is a great place to do this, because you can just go around the table. At the dining room scene in Django, what really is going on there is you have a lot of different acting methodology. Different actors are trained different ways, and then different careers strengthen different muscles as actors. So, for example, Jamie on the end of the table, he is a gifted mimic. He started in improv and comedy, and he's a singer and all that. He didn't start as an actor, and so his first acting gifts were sort of in imitating other people, and I think that all comes to its best fruition in the movie Ray, where he's an actor who has to imitate a person, but from a more interior place. But the exterior is spot on. I mean, he's just spot on. He is Ray. So, that's his bag, is he's really amazing at imitating. And then he's filling that in with acting. Christoph is sitting right next to me. Christoph is one of those people that when you're sitting next to him or across from him watching him act, you can't really tell what he's doing, because almost everything he's doing is for the camera. He's surgical. He's surgical. And sitting next to him, you're like, I don't know what he's doing. And then you watch it on camera on the screen and you're like, oh my God, that little half, whatever. Like you see that it was all these micro, he's a genius. He's a genius, but he's a genius on camera, and it's harder to figure out what he's up to when you're in front of him.
Right.
Leo, I've already talked about, is naturally gifted, and he's probably, other than Shirley MacLaine, the most riveting actor to watch live on set ever, ever, ever. And there was a moment where he's holding court at the front of the table, and I was
talking about the brain.
No, it was before that. And
Okay.
Just watching him, and I hear Laura, and I'm like, and then I hear Laura, and I'm like, what? And Quentin says, are you going to say your line? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in this movie. I got so captivated.
Take the fan hat off, Laura,
right?
And put the acting cap back on.
Because Leo is he's very theatrical, and he's very in the moment, and you can't take your eyes off him. He's riveting. And then across the table from me with Dennis, he and I are both method trained, both classically trained, both conservatory trained. So he and I are both doing head to toe work. And then Sam Jackson is an improv artist, and he's, you hire Sam to do Sam's version of things. You don't hire him to do it any other way than the way you trust him to come up with a character and ride with that. So, everybody had their own approach, and only Dennis and I had the same approach.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because everybody gets to the thing differently.
Yeah.
But then when you see, and you may not even feel, like we talk about Christoph, like you don't necessarily feel what he's doing or even experience it until you see it, and you're like, oh, that was genius, right? Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, let's. I love everything about this interview. I do want to honor your time. So talk about
I'm here now, so I mean, we're set.
Let's do it. You were right there. So. Writing Unblocked, this is a recent book you've written. Talk about it. How are you helping people, with this book, and how can they kind of learn more about it?
So it's Writing Unblocked, how I went from writing one book in 20 years to 5 books in 4 years. And when people get religion and they want to save you, I have never really felt that feeling of like wanting to save people. But now that I wrote this book, now that I figured it out, how to go from writing one book in 20 years to 5 books in 4 years, I feel like saying to everybody, I can save you, because I can save you so much time, energy, and effort. And really the biggest thing I can save you is that argument you get in with yourself where you quit. The argument you get with yourself about your ability to, like you have a great idea, or you have a story you want to tell, or you have a thing that happened in your life that you want to share, or you have a historical event that you want to explore in a book or a screenplay or a play or whatever. And you get started and you're so energized because you feel very passionate about this topic, this idea, this whatever. But nobody tells us how to write a book. And so, you get maybe half a chapter in and you're flailing. Maybe you get 6 chapters in and you're flailing. Maybe you don't know how long your chapter would be, and you have a 200-page first chapter and you're flailing. So whatever happened to me when I was writing my first novel, Lemonade Farm. I had a master's degree in creative writing, and I knew a lot about how to write each sentence. I knew a lot about how to write each paragraph, but nobody ever taught me how to write a book.
Yeah.
They just taught me how to do it well once I figured it out. Like here's how to make the words work for you. Here's how to use the words as tools. But they didn't say how to construct a book. How do I get from the idea in my head to a thing that I could give you and say, here, you should read my book.
Yeah.
So, well, when I was writing No Small Parts, I started applying some of the same tools I used for writing screenplays, which I had learned at Writers Boot Camp in LA. And then I started applying some of the tools I learned as a producer. as an actor, as a filmmaker, as a director, as a screenwriter. And the next thing I knew, I had what I call the 3-step prep. I had a process, and then I was able to write 5 books in 4 years, and it wasn't even that difficult. And it certainly wasn't nearly as scary. I mean, who writes a series of books? It's so nuts to think you can do that. And I sat down, never once worried about my ability to do it, because I had this process all worked out, this totally repeatable. I'm getting ready to do it again. I'm getting ready to turn a screenplay of mine into a short series of books. And I'm daunted by the, oh, here we go again. I'm going to do this big project, but I know how to do it. I totally know how to do it.
Right.
That takes a lot of pressure off.
It's the frame you're creating a framework for somebody to follow with clarity and with the confidence that, like, I just need to do these things and I will have a complete package, right?
And I wrote it for anybody, whether you have any skills as a writer, because we all have stories we want to tell.
Absolutely. I've got a short story about my time in the Peace Corps, and then I've got a screenplay, maybe a play, I don't know, about a fictional story about me in Africa traveling, or like a guy in Africa. I'm just like so many people, like, I'm not a writer. Why do I even think this is going to be,
right?
It's like that little self-talk. There's no structure to it. It's just something I do because I'm passionate about this idea, the story, but it never really completes itself.
Right.
There's no ending to it. And so there's a feeling of like, well, I don't know what to do with that now. Like,
right. And that's so common.
Totally common. All right. If you're listening to this, raise your hand if you've got something you've written and it's just kind of sitting there in on the shelf in your computer. Right. Or an idea. Really, it's there.
People come up to me and say, this just happened yesterday. People come up to me all the time and say, I've got an idea for you to write. And I'm like, your story, no. You write.
That's yours. Right.
Yeah. And I do believe we should all be writing our own stories. Now, if you want somebody else to rewrite it and make it sound prettier, I get that. But give them something to rewrite. Give them the story to rewrite.
Well, I'm getting your book. And I'm recommending everybody who's got an idea or got a story or got 6 paragraphs sitting on your laptop somewhere of a great concept, you should pick up her book.
I can give your readers, your audience, a coupon for a 20% discount on Writing Unblocked, the ebook, and also on my 6-video Creating Characters course, which is how to create in-depth, 3-dimensional characters that will move your story forward. And the code will be Mindset Podcast, and that's 2 words, Mindset Podcast, all caps.
And that will be in the show notes. So check the show notes for that information right there.
Yes.
Well, Laura, this was fantastic. I love hearing your stories. I love your enthusiasm, everything that you've been doing, not just in your career in acting, but obviously your writing and how you're helping people today. And so
I wanted
just
to
honor you
before we check out, though, because
Please, go for it.
A few of your shows, and I really wanted to say that I find it fascinating that you're tying together the athlete's mindset with that of the creative or the performer mindset, because so much of what I have benefited from in my career comes directly from having been an athlete. And I think it's really interesting to tie those 2 things together. In particular, certainly handling rejection. When you play sports, you have to handle losses, and you have to learn that that's not the sum total of you, that you didn't win this game is not who you are or how you are. It's just that one game. But beyond that, I was a volleyball player, and that teaches you, being a team, it's a team sport. So it teaches you how to know your job and do your job to the best of your ability, but also be there for everybody else on your team. And sometimes that means doing their job. Sometimes it means going in for the assist. Sometimes it means getting out of their way and not blocking them. And, whatever that means is so critical to the entertainment industry, because it's such a collaborative industry that I don't know how everybody else does it. But for me, I used a lot of the same tools for becoming part of a team in filmmaking. that I do for becoming a team member as a volleyball player. And then as a gymnast, that's just like movies, because in gymnastics, every person is trying to excel as an individual while they're on the team. And because you medal or ribbon individually in addition to as a team. And so, I find gymnastics to be critical to the way I've handled my career, and never more so than in Django, when I had to do my own stunt. and Quentin all day is walking around telling everybody, oh yeah, she's a gymnast, she'll be fine. She's a gymnast, she'll be fine. He never asked me whether or not I would be fine. He just told everybody, she's a gymnast.
That is the best. Fine. That is so funny.
And Daryl Hannah is also a gymnast. We're like the 2 6-foot gymnasts. And, we're not designed for that sport. It's not something we could have ever been Olympic caliber at. We're just not built for that. All the more reason that we had to work hard and prepare in order to compete at all as gymnasts when you're, the height that Daryl Hannah and I are. And I think one reason that he likes having gymnasts on the set is because we're not afraid of failure. We're not afraid to get a little bump and bruise to for the team. And I have a dare to fail mindset that comes from that. You can't be flipping over backward in the air without daring to fail.
Yeah.
And that set me up for a whole lifetime of daring to fail.
Well, and that's the other piece. Is like, we all love athletes. We love actors, performers, singers, dancers. I mean, they do some things that seem so like otherworldly to the average person, but they're just skills we can put towards life. Like, how do I show up for my kid? How do I show up for my family? How do I show up for the gym? I mean, so many people are just struggling to get into the gym and show up for themselves. I mean, there's so many reasons why these types of interviews just really mean so much to people. And so, and it's so cool that you listened to a couple of my episodes and that you got to.
Well, and somebody asked me, how do you show up for yourself? Like, how do you keep going to the gym on the days where you don't feel like it and all that? And I said, I don't ask myself if I feel like it. I just go.
It's not a negotiation.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't say, you just. Do you feel like going to? No, the answer would always be no. I'd much rather watch TV. So.
Right. Like, what do I feel like doing? The most obvious, like, we're always going to choose the laziest or most comfortable thing to do. Oh, I feel like going to the fridge and eating.
Cake, whatever. But no, I don't ask myself what I feel like doing when it's time to get something done. I just get it done. Do you ask yourself if you feel like doing laundry? No, you just do the laundry because otherwise you'd have to buy all new clothes at some point.
Yeah. Hey, there it is in a nutshell. No, I mean, and that's the years and years and years of showing up and showing up, even when we don't feel like it, even when life isn't going perfect, we show up, we continue to show up, and that creates confidence, belief.
Yes.
Going back to believing that the 104th audition is going to be the one that you get. I mean, yeah, really beautiful concepts that you're talking about in your books and obviously in this episode. I love it. I always learn. I'm the biggest fan of my own podcast because I get to interview. I get to geek out over your story and kind of go along for the ride too. So
I'm always telling people any muscle you use will strengthen. Any muscle that you work out is going to strengthen. So I try and strengthen the muscles that are going to get me further in life. I try and strengthen the muscles of, showing up for myself, not letting rejection be the definition of how I did on something, working for the career instead of the job, having that mentality of keeping my eye down the road instead of worrying about every single thing that I think or feel in a moment that are all passing and fleeting. Yeah. So those are the muscles I try and strengthen, and any muscle you exercise will get stronger.
It is true. As a personal trainer, I can attest to that. Well, hey, I'm going to hit stop here on the